My name is Neil Larrivee, and I'm the Vice President of Drumstick and Mallet Innovation. My meeting of Vic Firth was somewhat accidental. Vic was always a big hero in my life as a timpanist of the Boston Symphony. He was the principal timpanist. And for those of us who are orchestral students, he was the greatest of all time. And I was at a period of my time, of my work life, where my music work was not as full as I had hoped. And I was going to be short money. And a friend of mine was working for Vic at that time and suggested that, perhaps Vic might need another employee. And I didn't really think that was a great idea because I really saw myself as a player and a teacher. But, any good freelance musician doesn't say no. He says, sure, have him call me. And Vic did end up calling me saying, I got a recommendation that you would be great to have on our team. We need another person to come out and work. Would you come on out? Vic really was never intending to go into business. What he was really intending to do was build better drumsticks for himself and for other musicians who played in the orchestra. So this is in the 50s, 1950s, and commercially there's not very many manufacturers of drumsticks, and the quality is not very, very high. Certainly not at the quality that Vic was looking for to produce the best sounds possible. So we decided, well, why don't I try to make some myself? So what he was doing was buying large sticks, marching drumsticks, and then whittling them down himself to kind of get near a shape that he thought would musically make a sound. And then when he got close to something he thought was worthwhile, he would send that to a wood turner and they'd make a drawing and formulate a formal pair of drumsticks. He would test them, make some adjustments, and then he was coming up with sticks. The players in the orchestra, his colleagues, percussionists, were noticing, hey, where'd you get those sticks? I could really use some of those. And Vic was, well, I don't really have any. I mean, you can borrow them, but he wasn't really in business. And then his students were starting to notice too, at the New England Conservatory. Hey, I saw you playing with these sticks. I heard those. How can I get some of those? And again, he was like, geez, I don't have any more, but maybe I'll call the wood turner and see if he'll make me a few more pairs. A few more pairs, the players in the orchestra are using them, his students are using. Before he knew it, a few years later, he gets a phone call from the owner at Frank's Drum Shop out in Chicago, which was at that time the famous place that people went to buy drumsticks, especially for the orchestral world. And the owner said, I'm ready to buy sticks. I want to place an order. And Vic said, I'm not in business. I just made some just to help myself out, my students. I'm not in business. And the owner said, well, if you ever go into business, you let me know, I'll place the first order. Vic hung up the phone, said, well, maybe I ought to try to do something. And that's really as simple as it was for him in getting going in the business. I think, one of the unique opportunities that Vic had to make his company grow was how big of a musician he was and how well he was known throughout the industry. So that when people started getting the word out that Vic was making drumsticks, things started to really multiply really, really fast. And he had a network of drummers that he knew in Boston that were jazz drummers, and the owner of Jack's Drum Shop, who was at that time the big drum shop in Boston. And then before you know it, the New York guys got a hold of it. And so it really kind of naturally just grew from the network of drummers talking to drummers about, you got to check out these products. And so that was well before Vic was doing any advertising, before he even had a catalog. He was just word of mouth that really grew the company. The beginnings of the company were very simple in that we operated out of Vic's home. And in fact, it was challenging for us to ship and to receive shipments because we're on a residential road. And so honestly, his neighbors weren't thrilled that trucks were coming and delivering wood and picking up products to ship. So eventually Vic had to accept that, all right, it's time to move on to a facility that was a little more appropriate for the business. And that's when we knew we were getting somewhere. Well, the biggest difference that I can tell you is that in those early days, we weren't making the drumsticks. You know, we were working with partners who were making our sticks. Everything changed when Vic bought our facility here in Newport in 1994, and that was the step for us to really go into the big time. At that point, we had reached a saturation in the market where we were leading the market, but we were constrained by how much growth there was in filling demand. It was always challenging, and it needed to come to a point that we owned our own facility, so we controlled everything. And that's when we could really improve our qualities, our delivery times, and really start to innovate in even more successful ways about how to make drumsticks and think differently about the machines and the technology used to drying wood, because then we're in control of everything. We're not asking somebody else to do what we think is right. We're doing things that we're proving are correct to help make the very best drumsticks in the world. Developing new products, often people wonder how long that takes, and it really will depend on who's involved in the process. If we're using an internal design where it's myself and our team of market people where we have an idea and we want to develop, we can usually make a series of sticks happen within a 6-month period pretty easily. When you start to develop and collaborate with artists, things can take a much longer period of time, especially in a signature range of products, because that artist is going to have a lot of detail in how the design is working. The easy part is getting the first start, an idea of, hey, I have an idea and I want it to be this length, and I want it to produce this kind of sound, and I want it to be this light, and I want it this diameter, and so on. Those are the easy parts. It's the tweaking of all those things as you go to get the very specific response off the instrument and get the sound you're hoping for. It's like developing a great composition. You don't want to put necessarily a time block on it where I will do this in 1 week or else. You got to make sure that you explore all the possibilities to make sure that you get it exactly right. Most of our employees in the early days were students of Vic's or percussionists in the region, so there was always a profound respect for Vic, for whom he was as a musician, as a teacher, as an author, but he was an even better human being in terms of how he treated people. And when you worked for Vic, he really made you feel like we worked together, not that we worked for him. And matter of fact, if you said to Vic, hey, I really enjoy working for you, he said, no, we work together. You don't work for me, we work together. In all the years that I worked for him, and it was for a very, very long period of time, well over 30 years that I worked with him, I saw him upset very, very few times. He was very, very professional, controlled. Emotion was never getting in the way of the way he ran the company and the way he treated people. He always operated on a very, very first-class way. And so the employees loved him. And as we got larger, we started adding more people who weren't necessarily musicians, because as a company becomes more professional, we need finance people, we need real marketeers and salespeople, and they may not be drummers, and they could be very, very good and not be drummers. And he treated them just as well, and they loved him just as much. And so even in our building today, Vic has been gone now for a few years, but people still remember what a wonderful gentleman he was and how well he treated all of us. Especially those of us who've been with Vic for a long time, we're very thankful for how thoughtful he was about what the future would be like for his company. He realized that his family was not going to continue the company after he moved on, so it was important for him to merge with a company that would take great care of us. And there were many, many companies wanting to acquire the Vic Firth company, and choosing Zildjian was absolutely the right decision for him in knowing that a family-based company that has values that are very, very high, care very much important about his employees. He really wanted to know that the people who had helped build his company would have a good place to work. So in 2010, Vic and the Zildjians created a partnership, and now we are all part of the Zildjian company, and that all happened well before he passed. So the transition worked very smoothly, and it was not an abrupt change. In fact, it was a very welcoming change. You know, we moved our facilities down into the Norwell building, where they've built a brand new space that was very, very beautiful for us, and we really moved into a substantially upgraded facility. So we've been very, very fortunate in that regard. The Zildjian commitment to the future has been extraordinary. Up here in Maine, we have a facility that some of the building is old as 1865, and they are committed to us having the best facilities to work in, and we're in the middle of a transition in our same town here in Newport, Maine, but where we are really expanding and developing a factory of the future where we can make the very, very best drumsticks going forward with the best technologies and the best systems that we can use to create the best products. The Vic Firth slogan has always been the perfect pair. And Vic meant that from the standpoint of having a connection with the drummer, the musician, where the product that they had in their hand was an extension of themselves musically, so that they could achieve the musical sounds that they desired. That's what motivates us every day to make the products we make. We want to make products that satisfy the musical needs of our artists, the students, the teachers, all of the consumers, and we want to do so in the best way possible. That's what gets us up and gets us going every single day.